All right, it's July 17th, 2016, and this is your Mountain State update for July 17th, 2016. I'm John Cantees, and I'm being joined by Dan Heyman. Dan, how's it going?
Doing well. Interesting story coming up at the Public News Service. I'm with the West Virginia News Service, the branch of the Public News Service here in West Virginia. It's about the number and treatment of mentally ill in county jails nationally, which is a real quiet crisis that we're failing to deal with.
Absolutely. Go to check out Dan's stuff at publicnewsservice.org.
That's right.
O-R-G.
Yep.
Okay, so we need right off the bat here. So this just popped up on my way here, or just about before I left. There is a shooting in Louisiana. And we don't know. There's a lot of details coming out. This is that stage of the news cycle where when something happens, there's a lot of information. Half of it's right, half of it's wrong. So right. I don't want to go into it too much right now. But it looks like 3 officers have been shot in Louisiana. The gunman is taken care of. We don't know if the gunman's dead. We don't know if the gunman may be one of the fatalities. We don't know. That's about all we know. We just know that there's a shooting in Louisiana.
They were shot fairly close to the police headquarters, apparently, in Louisiana. And there's a couple of things that occur to me about this, and I don't know if you can agree or disagree. And if the audience agrees or disagrees, they can hit us up at Mountain State Up on Twitter. Let us know what you think about this. But this is. Again, I said this was about the shootings in Dallas, but I'll repeat again because I think it's worth repeating that if you believe that African American, especially men, are subject to police brutality too often, and I think that's almost without, I think we can say that almost without fear of contradiction. Acting with violence towards the police is just going to make that worse because it's going to make the police more on edge and they're going to be more fearful.
Right. Because, the reason why, at least, I would say probably the majority of these situations that these shootings where the police are where the police are doing the shootings, it's probably out of fear.
Yeah. Well, one thing that we need to make clear is that they're acting because they're assuming that these African American men, typically young men, are a threat to them, and that they're just reacting too quickly. And as a result, you see, like the case of Tamir Rice in Cleveland, I think it was in Cleveland. Anyway, it was in Ohio. It was a 12-year-old boy with a toy gun was shot in the park.
Right.
There was a really disturbing speech made by the black Republican senator from South Carolina, Senator Scott, who said that he has been repeatedly stopped by police in Washington, D.C., including Capitol Police, and this is a United States senator. So that is feeding into this, this rage. The other part that I want to talk about is that, there's just this culture of aggression in American politics right now that is really destructive. And, if you want to help the cause of African Americans, the last thing you want to do is shooting at the police because, the people who are defenders of the police or excessive defenders of the police, perhaps, are going to say, look, this is, black nationalists or, violent black extremists out
Fox
there.
News and all these people have plenty to work with. And you don't want to give them that. You don't want to give them ammunition in this argument, metaphorical ammunition. You don't want to give them that. So, this is awful. And as it develops, I'm sure everyone will learn about it and it will,
Well, it's just depressing that American culture has gotten to this point. I mean, once upon a time, we made advances in race in this country because we were able to look at figures And I don't want to overstate this, because there were black leaders who were advocating a stronger position, a more aggressive position, even violence, at the time of Martin Luther King's work on race, and everyone points to MLK. I mean, of course, at the time, Stokely Carmichael and the Black Panthers were taking a much more aggressive stance. But Malcolm X, whose stance became, who was really converted after his trip on the Hajj to Mecca, transition to a much more peaceful attitude. But the reason that King took a nonviolent stance is because it works, is because it gave him the power of moral authority. It gave him a good position on which to stand. Ultimately, probably got him killed.
Sure, but for the sake of the movement and the cause, that was the most effective
strategy. It really was. It was much more effective than it would have been as violent as the reaction to King was, and it was violent. It would have been worse if they had tried, and if they had tried a more violent stance themselves. And
sure.
Yeah.
So keep an eye on your local news services. Keep an eye on our Twitter. We're going to stay up on this. It's Mountain State Up, at Mountain State Up. And you can also subscribe to us on YouTube. The link to the YouTube page is on our Twitter page. Now, we have a lot we would need to get into today. I want to move quickly into this attempted coup in Turkey.
Right.
Now, it was looking pretty rough for a little while, but it is over. The attempt is over. The coup was unsuccessful.
Right.
Outside of that, I realize that Turkey is an incredibly important territory.
And this is not good.
The fact that this is resolved for now is good, but this shows us that there is a lot of there's some upheaval going on within the military.
Well, there's an enormous amount of stress in Turkey that people have been pointing to, and I don't think it would have been. I don't think it. This is the outcome of this could not have been good for the United States in either case, I don't think. Because if the coup succeeds, yes, it's probable that it would have been a more secularist, more, Western-oriented government. I mean, that's typically the direction that the military in the past has chosen when it's overthrown the government in Turkey. We don't really know what the intentions of these coup plotters were. But it still would have been an abrogation of democracy, which, is never a good thing.
Right.
The problem, of course, is that Erdogan, the president of Turkey, is becoming increasingly autocratic, and now his autocratic tendencies, his Islamist tendencies, are going to be reinforced. Now, the part of what makes this difficult for us is that Turkey is an absolutely essential ally right now.
That's the thing that we should all be concerned about, because we need Turkey in a lot of ways for a lot of reasons in that region.
And we are once again stuck in the Middle East, allying ourselves with people that we don't necessarily like, because they're the lesser of a number of evils. I mean, Turkey is helping us battle ISIS. They have been helping us support some of the secularist or moderate opposition in Syria. They've been battling the Kurds, who are our greatest allies, which is, of course, another complication. And part of the reason that a lot of people are speculating that part of the reason that the military felt like they could undertake this coup is because they've been battling the Kurds for a year now. And that's really, damaging to our interests there.
Is Turkey a part of NATO?
It is.
Okay, so what does this mean for NATO? Or, ramifications down the road? Does this mean anything down the road?
Well, I mean, we've been partners. They've been members. Turkey has been members of NATO during coups in the past. It's worth pointing out, again, this has been repeatedly pointed out, but that the military has taken power in Turkey before. Yeah. They're sort of the defender of the secularist, what's known as Kemalism after Kemal Ataturk, the sort of Western-oriented nationalist viewpoint of strain in Turkey, and the military. Again, this is unfortunate because we end up on the side of the military taking power, which is an anti-democratic step. But they've really defended what is most to our interest internationally, this position of Turkey as a non-Islamist nation. Now, Erdogan has been moving in an Islamist direction, has been becoming increasingly conservative. He's suppressing the press. He's been suppressing elements of the judiciary. And he's just going to be strengthened by this. Winning over this coup, he is, of course, the democratically elected leader of that country.
Sure. I mean, he's democratically elected as much as we don't like him.
That's right. I mean, this was kind of we face this occasionally with Chavez, Hugo Chavez in Venezuela. We faced it, other places. Vladimir Putin in Russia has an enormous amount of popular support. Sure. What do we do when the population, we believe in self-determination, but then what do we do when the population self-determines that they want someone that is really bad for us? Well, I mean, this is tough.
Oh, I mean, it's a sovereign nation. The best thing we can do is work with them the best we can, and
I know,
avoid them when we can.
I know.
As well.
But I want to make clear that we are allied with the Kurds in Iraq and Syria. We're allied with the Iraqi government, which is also allied with the Iranians.
Right.
We're allied with the Israelis. We're sort of, again, best of a bad lot, also allied with the Gulf states, Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, who are supporting some of the forces in Syria. The problem being is that they're accused, and I think it's probably true, either quietly or intentionally, the Gulf states, and some are saying this about Turkey as well, that they're supporting Islamists in Syria because they have an Islamist ideology. And this is a problem for us because those people are antithetical to, we fear that there could be a source of terrorism. So it's a series of bad options for us.
Right, which is so often the case in that region for us.
Yeah, I mean, and this is what moves people to sort of, in America, to sort of throw up their hands and say we shouldn't be engaged, which I think is really short-sighted. Sure. We have to stay in that fight. We have to fight our corner, as the English say.
Speaking of short-sighted, Donald Trump has settled on Mike Pence.
Yes.
After nearly changing his mind, according to some reports that I've seen, even went on CNN.
What's striking to me, how many people around Donald Trump look like Roger Sterling? That's the thing that's just amazing to me. His friend Roger Stone is almost a spitting image for Roger Sterling.
That's bizarre.
Pence, isn't that bizarre?
That's weird.
Pence has that white hair, too. It's almost like an intentional throwback to the Mad Men.
It's a thing. Anyway, a lot of people don't know who Mike Pence is.
Right.
So this is his VP pick. He's he's not going back. He's not going to pick Gingrich like he should have, which was my guess, and I still think that would have been the better choice for him.
Gingrich said a smart thing about this. He said that if Trump picked him, it would have been a 2-pirate ticket. It would have been, sort of these 2 slash and burn kind of off the cuff.
He didn't want Gingrich to overshadow him, and that's why I think he didn't go for it. Maybe other reasons too.
Could be. Well, this is. Do you have any comments about Pence?
Yeah, I have lots about Pence. Basically, I looked into him. I knew about him a little bit, but I looked into him a little bit more, and I've compiled a handy dandy little list here for people who don't know a lot about Mike Pence, and we're going to get to know him quite well. And a lot of these topics are probably going to be explored a little more. But for right now, let's go over the things that I've come across that I found particularly interesting about Mike Pence. For one, he's a former congressman.
Right.
So this is legislative experience and executive branch experience because now he's a governor of Indiana. So that's probably a big reason why he was picked, I
Right.
imagine, because he's got connections in with both branches.
Right.
He also has connections with the Koch brothers, who have given him hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I didn't know that, although I'm not surprised.
Which is good for Trump.
We'll come back
because
to that in a second.
Trump's almost broke,
Right.
so that's good for Trump. And I'm talking about his campaign, not him as a person.
Right.
But his campaign's almost broke, and this is something he needs. He needs that Koch brother money.
Right.
So as governor of Indiana, this is a little more recent. Mike Pence signed the anti-LGBT bill. It was similar to the Religious Restoration Act that we almost had here.
The permission to discriminate bill.
Yes. So he signed that. And, so we have that. We have that on there. That's something that he's going to have to
That's
defend.
indicative. Go ahead.
Well, sure. Yeah, but that's something he's going to have to defend over time.
Right.
Now, a couple things that are interesting. He differs from Trump on. One is that he supported the Iraq War, still supports it, which Trump says he differs with him on. Trump has taken the official stance that he was opposed to the Iraq War, although he really kind of wasn't.
Although Trump recently, I mean, it's you pick your day and you'll find your Trump position.
Sure.
The other day he was saying that we were at war with ISIS after this latest terrorist attack in France, and that we should carry this battle to them, which directly contradicts his position before, which is that we shouldn't be involved.
Sure.
So I mean, it's just he's kind of all over the place on a lot of stuff. But
if you were to ask him in an
case.
interview today what his official stance on the Iraq War is, though, he would say it's a mistake.
Right, and
that would contradict.
Well, it's
Pence.
easy to say in retrospect that it's a mistake. It's pretty clear.
Sure.
But we're now 15 years after the invasion. So
and there's going to be differences between VP picks and presidential nominees. But this is a big thing to me. This seems like a big thing to differ with your vice presidential pick on.
Yeah.
And this is 13. But this is a big thing that's going to, this is going to be weird for them. And I don't see it just doesn't.
Right, and he's also a strong proponent of free trade.
Sure.
He
supports the TPP.
A couple of things about Pence, and I don't want to interrupt you if you've got
ahead.
more to
That's
say.
what we're doing, yeah.
But he's one thing. He's a traditional Republican.
He's traditional most of the time. He gets a little fringy here and there.
Right. Well, he's a traditional Republican of a particular stripe. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
So he's definitely an insider. He's definitely
establishment.
Someone who's approved of by a large enough chunk of the Republican establishment to be credible.
Sure.
And Trump emphasized in his introduction of Pence, which was the rollout was a complete shambling disaster, but that's another story.
Sure.
It was Donald the Dumpster Fire Trump. But Pence he emphasized that how steady and reliable Pence is. So he's looking, maybe is looking for somebody to bring, rather than Gingrich, who would be another loose cannon, that, looking to someone who can provide some ballast, some gravitas, some steadiness. And Pence is, a very conventional politician in that sense.
He's a good voice for Trump to have on his shoulder, I guess.
He's also a salve, a balm, a way for Trump to reinforce his right wing, because Pence is extremely conservative. I mean, he's one of these hardcore Christian, economically libertarian, corporatist. He's got all of the hallmarks that we think of just a hardcore Tea Party / establishment Republican.
Sure, he checks
Koch
all the
brother.
boxes.
Yeah, he checks all the boxes. Opposition to gays, gay marriage. He passed one of the things that's interesting that you point out, that he's gotten a lot of money from the Kochs, because he passed a right to work bill in Indiana, and came here and talked about the right to work that the West Virginia legislature under Bill Cole, the gubernatorial candidate of the Republicans this year, have
Foghorn
done.
Leghorn.
Right, Foghorn Leghorn. Yeah, right. But he's part of that Koch quasi-party, you know, the ALEC and the Koch brothers and their money and their networking, and Bill Cole is too. So if you look for a cognate for Mike Pence in the West Virginia context, Bill Cole is a pretty good example.
Sure.
But he's a hard right cultural conservative on those cultural issues, you know, religious, you know, Christian conservative type. And that is something that it's interesting because Trump has been somewhat weak in that regard.
That's what I hear, but has he really? Because he won the Republican nomination with more votes from the base that he is purportedly losing, from more votes from that base than any other Republican in the history of the party.
Yeah.
He has the base. He doesn't.
Yeah.
I don't think he needs to shore up the base. He's got the base. The people he doesn't have are Jeb Bush people, establishment Republicans that are angry.
Country club Republicans.
Yeah, he doesn't have them, but he doesn't need them. How many are we talking about here? I mean, how many? 5,000 maybe? That's nothing. He's got the base. That's what's important.
I think that it's interesting the number of Republican leaders and a fair number of, I assume, rank and file Republicans, sort of old conventional Republicans, are skipping the convention or are otherwise distancing themselves from Donald the Dumpster Fire. Sure. And that I think that the assumption on the part of Trump, I don't know, you know, I can't read his mind, but we may speculate that perhaps he's looking to Pence to shore that up, and he says, you know, these people are objecting to, you know, to Trump because he's not conservative enough. He's not enough of a hardcore Christian. Now, I agree with you. I don't think Trump really needs to work to get those people.
Right.
They're either there with him or they're going to be by the election.
They've made their mind up.
I think they've made their mind up. Yeah, there's no way they're going to vote for Hillary Clinton. The only question is, are they going to go fishing on Election Day?
Right.
But, you know, I don't think he really needed to shore them up.
Pence isn't going to move that one way or the other.
Right, but he might have looked at the number of people who are, for example, there's a significant number of senators, and they're actually pretty blatant about this, a number of them who are skipping the Republican convention this time, you know, and Republican delegates and Republican, you know, establishment figures from around the country, local important Republicans who are just, they don't want to go near him. And I think his assumption was that, you know, Ted Cruz got the second number of delegates after him, and Ted Cruz is a hardcore Christian conservative, so he was thinking maybe he should pick someone to ameliorate that faction of the party. I don't think it's a smart step, but he is. I think it speaks to his weakness, broadly speaking.
Sure, I think it does too. I think there were some establishment people telling him, "Hey, you're losing the base, buddy. You need an establishment guy," and he caved to that.
Well, and a steady hand. I think that's probably a smarter step rather than choosing like a loudmouth like Chris Christie or.
Right. I don't think it'll hurt him. But I don't think it's going to do more good.
No, I mean, I don't think it'll help him any. I don't think it'll hurt him. I don't think it'll help him.
Some more fun facts about Pence. He doesn't believe in evolution. He thinks the Earth is 6,000 years old.
Oh, okay.
So that's good to know.
Wow.
For the record, it's not. That's sorry. It's we're talking
I heard a piece on public broadcasting this morning on Radio Lab about they found a frozen body 5,000 years old. You know, and a recognizable, you know, modern human, modern in the sense biologically modern human. So it's almost impossible that the Earth would be. You know.
Hey, man, God put that there to test you.
Yeah, well, that's what they say.
Anyway, he's also a climate change denier.
Oh boy,
which
great.
You know,
really,
I'm done with this. I'm done with climate change deniers. Look outside. Yeah. I mean, it's not. It's just not something we can afford to litigate anymore. I'm done. I'm just done.
I mean, I forget how many of the hottest years on record have been in the last decade. I mean, we're seeing the glaciers melt. We're seeing increased flooding. We're seeing increased storms. This is
right. And because people want to be objective, and because people don't want to seem like partisan liberal hacks, they give people who deny climate change a platform that they don't deserve, and they give them a chance to talk about why it's not actually happening. Here's what's really happening. And they give them this platform, and they create this false middle in between climate change and climate change existing and not existing. Sorry, it exists, and it's happening. And this is something I have no more patience for that.
There's a wonderful video. I'm not sure if it's on YouTube, but I recommend it if you can find it. Bill Nye took two big glass bottles, and they each had a light bulb in them. And he just let one be full of air from the room, and he created the other one so that he would take CO2 from, I think it was like Coca-Cola bottles or, anyway, it was soda that had filled up the other one. And he had two thermometers in the bottom. And he turned on the light bulbs, and within a matter of minutes, you could see that the one with the CO2 in it was higher. The temperature was higher. I mean, there's no question about this. That's
a great experiment if the other side of this debate was interested in facts. That would be great. That would do a real good job, but they're clearly not.
Well, and I mean, it really does bother me that, this Koch network is deeply tied into climate change deniers. And there are a lot of people in West Virginia who feel like it's economically necessary for them to latch on to that belief. And it's really destructive. And it delays us taking the steps that we need to take. But also the fact that we would consider someone who doesn't believe in evolution, someone who believes that the Earth is 6,000 years old, would sign a right to discriminate bill, promote a objection to marriage equality. This is the mainstream. This is Donald Trump reaching to a steady mainstream character. This is what passes for a mainstream character in the Republican Party now.
In that bubble, yes.
And the money people who know better. I mean, the Sheldon Adelsons and the Charles and David Koch
brothers.
These guys are not stupid.
They're not stupid.
They know perfectly well that the Earth is not 6,000 years old. They know that climate change is real, and they're allying with these people for the worst possible reasons, and for their own benefit. The point is not
they don't want to change everyone's
their own
mind.
Ideology.
They want to muddy up the conversation enough so that it's hard to know for sure. That's all they need to do. Once they do that, they've won.
And
they don't
we're
need to change
supposed
their
to
mind.
accept this as, this is supposed to be normal. It's supposed to be normal when a West Virginia legislator on Twitter says that Hillary Clinton should be hung.
We'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah,
that's coming up for sure.
I mean, a coarsening of American and a conscious acceptance of really fringe conspiratorial positions.
And what's weird is there's a mix of people who believe it and people who are just manipulating the people who believe it.
Yeah.
So it's a little hard to nail down who's who. But I don't believe this guy believes any of this stuff. This guy, okay, so another thing, he's what's called a smoking truther. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, this
is somebody who
that's astonishing to me.
For those who don't know what a smoking truther is, let me enlighten you here. Smoking truthers, he has questions. This is Mike Pence. He has questions about whether or not cigarettes cause cancer and emphysema. He has questions. He would like to have more studies done. He doesn't necessarily believe it yet. And I'm sure, completely coincidentally, he's taking lots and lots of money from big tobacco.
Yeah, Altria and the rest
people who benefit from higher sales of cigarettes. I mean, come on. This is not an honest
This is not
person.
rocket science.
This is a husk of a human being, corporate sellout Republican. This is Mike Pence. So for those who don't know Mike Pence, now you know Mike Pence. There's Mike Pence.
Yeah. Well, he, of course, he came to, it was an interesting article in the Gazette about Mike Pence's visit to West Virginia to support his allies here in West Virginia. People like Bill Cole, people who were also associated with the Koch network, people who were, his allies. And this is who, this is who the Republican Party. This is the establishment kind of safe, steady figure in the Republican Party, as I was saying, is somebody who doesn't believe that cigarettes cause cancer, somebody who believes the Earth is 6,000 years old, somebody who believes that, Well, and I'm repeating myself.
Sure, but I mean, it bears repeating. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
So that's his vice presidential pick. Hillary has not done hers yet. I'm guessing she probably will sometime after the Republican convention, because that would make the most sense, right? You know, they have their convention.
Let them have their
then
time.
You change the topic to her.
Yeah.
So that's what
I want to point out something just briefly.
Sure, go ahead.
A lot of the chatter online right now, we've seen the same names floated. One of the ones that's sort of floated to the top, as it were, is Tim Kaine, a senator from Virginia, former head of the DNC.
Oh, sorry, I fell asleep when you said Tim Kaine.
He would be the sort of a nice, steady.
Yeah, he's fine. He'd be fine.
He's a great. Personally,
maybe help shore up a little bit of Appalachia and maybe a little bit of the South.
I mean, he's fairly liberal. He's a good guy. He speaks Spanish fluently. I mean, I want to emphasize the fact that everyone who watches him, for example, I think he's taken a very principled stand that if we're going to wage war on ISIS, we should have a declaration of war, which I think is very smart.
Sure.
He's on the Armed Services Committee. He is. Everyone who talks about him says he's a good person. They say he's a nice guy, and in fact, there was an article in one of the newspapers in Virginia that said, "What's a nice guy like this doing in a race like that?" You know.
Yeah. He should be thinking about whether or not he wants to do it.
I don't know whether he's enough of a fire breather, but
that might be what she wants. She
could
wants,
be.
It could draw a nice contrast between
her
ticket and Trump's ticket.
She has been of late emphasizing that she's a steady pair of hands in troubled times, which I think is
that's her ticket right there, man. Quit talking about Pokemon Go, Hillary. Quit talking about Pokemon Go. Stop it. Talk about how you're a good administrator. That's what she is.
Yeah.
She's a principal. You know, she's not a teacher.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Anyway, so let's get in a little bit about. One more thing about Mike Pence that I think is interesting. He called Trump's Muslim ban offensive and unconstitutional. This was the ban that Trump came up with, where no Muslim can enter America. That's what I want. And so he called that offensive and unconstitutional.
Well, at least he's right about that.
I mean, of course it is. So,
but I mean, he is going to have to swallow his pride on a lot of these issues
he's going to spend the whole campaign answering questions about this.
A lot of people have pointed out that Trump, in his sort of thin-skinned, narcissistic way, really is degrading and corrosive towards the people who choose to be around him. In other words, if you sign on to be an underling, as one political pundit, Josh Marshall, put it, you know, it's like entering the mouth of hell in Dante's Inferno. Abandon hope, all ye who enter here. I mean, he is signing on to swallow his pride, to be diminished and humiliated in a thousand tiny ways by being around Donald Trump, who doesn't accept anyone being as important or as, he thinks he's the greatest guy in the world, and he's not going to accept anyone else crowding out any of his limelight.
I think we're gearing up for the most boring vice presidential debate of all time. That's what we're going to see.
Well, it's going to be Elizabeth Warren or...
I don't think she'll pick Elizabeth Warren. Yeah. I just don't. Now, she's been meeting with Elizabeth Warren. She apparently had
I think Warren would be a
people.
great choice. I do think it's kind of a rough thing to take a Democrat out of the Senate right now.
That's a reason why she won't choose her, because that seat Elizabeth Warren has can flip Republican at any moment, and Hillary's going to need Elizabeth Warren in the Senate as an ally, and she's going to want her in the Senate as an attack dog.
Yeah, of course, that's an advantage that Tim Kaine has, is that the governor in Virginia is a Democrat,
right?
Also, unlike
centrist
Cookie Borer, Cory Booker, the governor of New Jersey.
Okay,
New Jersey is a Republican now. It's Chris Christie, so Christie would name the Booker's replacement.
True. All right, so let's move into this. We referenced it earlier just for a moment.
Yeah.
Delegate Michael Falk calls for Hillary Clinton to be executed. This was on, it's all over national media. This isn't just in the Gazette. This isn't just on wvpublic.org.
Yeah.
This is everywhere. This, yet again, here we go. We're either in the news for a disaster, which we can't help, or we're in the news for something awful like this.
Yeah,
and this
guy's
is
an embarrassment.
It's an embarrassment. You're right. That's the word. I'm embarrassed.
Well, I want to go back to something I was saying earlier.
And he has yet to apologize for it, is the thing. He's tried to explain it away. He says, what I called for is for her to be tried, and the maximum penalty for treason is death. Technically, it's not death by hanging. What are you saying? That's not I mean, we don't need an explanation of what it meant.
Yeah.
You need to apologize and get off it, right?
Yeah.
Get ahead of it, apologize, and be done.
There's a really a disturbing coarsening of public debate, a really disturbing coarsening of public culture, political culture in this country. I mean, we're not just divided; we're especially on the Republican side, frankly, very quickly, willing to very quickly look to threats of violence. And there was a piece I saw where Carl Palladino, former Republican nominee for governor of New York and a surrogate / associate of Donald Trump's supporter. I mean, I question whether we could really classify him as a spokesman for Trump, but he's definitely close to him. He's also in the construction industry in New York, and this is a guy who's gone off before, so this is not entirely a surprise. He's kind of sort of a loudmouth, objectionable guy. Got into trouble for emailing links to bestiality videos.
Right. And it's probably because he thought it was funny. I mean, it's a stupid thing to do.
He was emailing with a delegate to the Republican convention, and this was one of the members of the No Trump, anybody but, no Donald, no how faction of the Republican Party. And Palladino threatened her with, said, you should be killed if you're going to oppose Donald Trump as the leader of the Republican Party. I mean, we're seeing Corey Lewandowski manhandling reporters. We're seeing violence at Trump events.
Right.
We're seeing, of course, the NRA. And, there's been for years talk about, quote unquote, Second Amendment solutions to tyranny. Now, what that is that's an inherent threat.
Right. It's barely coded language. CNN would probably call that coded language or a dog whistle. That sounds more like a regular whistle to me.
I think it's a direct threat. And clearly intended to be so, that they feel like they should be able to intimidate
votes. It shores up votes. It gets people excited, and they end up winning elections. That's why they do it. They don't care who gets killed. They don't care when a crazy person goes and shoots up a Planned Parenthood when he takes this kind of crap seriously. They don't care about that. They care about exciting the base and getting votes and getting elected, and then continuing their corrupt relationship with their criminal friends on Wall Street. That's what it is.
Part of the problem is that this coarsening of the debate, this coarsening of the culture, translates into the kinds of actions that we're seeing, or makes, shall we say, slightly more permissible or thinkable the actions like we're seeing today in Louisiana, which is totally unacceptable. I mean, we shouldn't have to, in the United States of America, the wealthiest, the most advanced society, the most technologically sophisticated, the longest established democracy in the world, unless you want to, give that nod to the Parliament in England. But the most important nation in the world, the most powerful, should be self-confident society in the history of human in history. In the history of humankind, we should not be looking to violence in our political culture. This is one of the reasons why you have a constitution. This is why you have a rule of law, is so that people don't have to be afraid. This is why, and it's. I think it's a somewhat careless, thoughtless result of things like the proliferation of guns, where people talk about how that's it may be necessary for them to commit violence.
Sure.
When was the last time anybody listening actually got in a fist fight? I mean, it just doesn't happen. It doesn't have to happen. Unless you go out and look for trouble, you're not going to get into trouble in this society.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, there are people who, there are places in Charleston where that's not true. There are neighborhoods where it's you're in danger.
But for the most part, what you're saying.
But for the most part, and part of the reason those neighborhoods are so dangerous is because of the proliferation of weapons of violence.
Which, of course, you can tie back to gun manufacturers. I mean, it's not rocket science. I mean, you just look at who benefits from it financially, and you can find a connection. Yeah. Now, the Democratic Party chairwoman, Belinda Beafor. Beafor or
Beafora?
Beafor. Well,
I'm not sure.
The Democratic Party chairwoman spoke out against Michael Folk and said Folk's actions should deem him as unfit to serve, and Speaker Tim Armstead should take action if Folk doesn't resign. Let me tell you this. I'm going to make a prediction. Folk will not resign, and Tim Armstead will not take action.
Yeah. I think that's pretty clear. I mean, Beafor obviously is...
She's right.
She's in this case, she's right. It's another case where, somebody is given their political opponent's ammunition, as it were.
Sure.
So sorry to use that metaphor.
Right. At least we acknowledge that it's a bad metaphor.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
But she will definitely take a strident Democratic position. She will, part of her job is to produce the Democratic rhetoric around the issue and to be aggressive and attack, and she always does. I mean, if you follow,
right, she's great at
if you follow those emails, that's what she does. She's a party official. That's what she's supposed to do.
Sure.
In this case, I think she's right.
Now, the thing,
and I think you're right. I don't think he's going to quit. And I don't think he's going to be.
And what the people in his district need to do is vote him out. I mean, that's what you got to do. I mean, that's the only. I mean, Tim Armstead isn't going to take him out. He's not going to resign. If you want to see change, you go and you vote.
What county is he from? Do we know?
He's in Berkeley.
Berkeley County.
Yeah, I believe.
Oh boy. Okay.
So it's not impossible. It's about turnout. It's not about. I mean, what's the percentage of turnout in anywhere in West Virginia or in the country for that matter? Yeah. It's generally under 50%.
Yeah.
If everyone were to get up and go vote, this would be a completely different country overnight.
Well, Berkeley is demonstrating itself to have a series of fairly pretty conservative legislators that they're sending to the Capitol.
Well, they could send another conservative then primary him.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? There are solutions out there, and it's up to the electorate. This is the kind of thing that's up to the voters.
Yeah.
Tim Armstead is not going to remove this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim, and this is just, if you want to see change, you got to get up, you got to go vote. You got to stop sharing memes for 5 seconds and go vote. That's all you got to do. And everybody has to do it. Everyone has to play.
Follow the Pokemon to the polls.
Pokemon go to the polls.
That's right.
But yeah, that's an interesting topic. I don't know where we go from here as far as rhetorical, other than I feel like we need to call it out where we see it, where we call out problems where we see it, and we call them what they are. This is not, as CNN would probably say, the rhetoric of politicians now has gone in this direction. This is not politicians.
Well, the rhetoric of
Republicans.
Politicians has gone in this direction, but that doesn't mean that we have to. That doesn't mean that we have to accept it.
And sure, but we should also be more precise about the issue. And yes, can you find a Democrat somewhere who said something stupid? Sure, but this is a problem by and large on the side of the Republicans. This is mostly their problem.
Yeah.
You don't see Tim Kaine putting up a website with crosshairs over top of politicians' faces.
Yeah.
Sarah Palin does that.
Right.
This is a Republican problem. And because it gets them votes, they don't care.
And I think at some point the Republican Party is going to have to deal with this. I mean, they've engendered the
It's
Trump.
what led to Trump.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
and they're not happy about that.
And it's not an accident that Trump's events have been spotted with violence. I mean, there's been a constant undercurrent of threat and intimidation, coming out of those events. I do think that there's sort of a broader historical trend here, which is, some cultural observers, some historians, primarily liberals, obviously, say that this notion of political intimidation is a deep thread in American culture. And I think that's true.
Sure.
I think, for example, they would talk about they would say that the Second Amendment, part of the reason for this, we got into this discussion, I guess it was last week, that part of the reason for the Second Amendment, some would say it was because there were Southerners who were concerned about slave revolts. But I would say that may or may not be true, but it was certainly true that it was because of people on the frontier who wanted to have weapons to defend or attack Native Americans. So this is built into the fabric of American life. We've seen throughout our history a recurrence of violence. Now, it's worth noting that this violence has often been used quite consciously, quite in a very organized manner, to suppress the rights and the political participation of people of color. And this is what we're talking about when we're talking about the Ku Klux Klan. This is what we're talking about when we're talking about lynchings. Thousands of African Americans have been lynched in this country. Most in the late 19th century, early 20th century. This is what we're talking about when we talk about violence against Native Americans, Hispanics, so there is an inculcation of the notion of, I'm going to put this out here, and if you really want to disagree with me, hit us up at Mountain State Up. I'm willing to hear another side of this, but I think it's entirely possible that this culture of violence has been created to defend white privilege. This is who where we have turned as white people in far too often. Too many cases in American history. And white privilege is being threatened now. It's threatened by male privilege also. White privilege is threatened by the fact that we have an African-American president. It's further threatened by the possibility, male privilege is further being threatened by the possibility that we have a female president. And these are... it's threatened by the notion of marriage equality. It's threatened by the ideas of homosexuals in the army. Our notion of ourself, as white, middle-class Americans, men and women, but primarily men. We see a very strong male orientation, a gender gap in the Trump campaign. This is where we have tended to turn when we feel embattled, when we feel threatened, when we feel undermined. The tendency is to look to violence and intimidation, and the fact that we do this speaks very poorly of people who look like me and share my gender. I'm afraid, a middle-aged white guy, and it ends up with these ridiculous moments where you've got these. I remember a few years ago there were these sudden growth of mushrooming of militia groups, and so you would have these news reporters who would go out and they'd videotape. It was a bunch of fat white guys,
right?
And I feel sorry for those people.
They're threatened by some nebulous force.
There is a level of threat that's genuine. Let's acknowledge that these people feel economically undermined, and they are being economically undermined. I mean, rising of diversity and equality. It sounds nice, but if you allow people of color to have access to the same tools and opportunities in the economy that white people have, somebody's going to lose out. At least,
according to
it's
them.
a zero-sum game. And this is also happening at the same time when there's this level of deindustrialization and the factories are shutting down and laying people off. And so there's, all of those great blue-collar jobs, the mining jobs, the car assembly jobs that the middle class has looked to are going away. And there's
a lot of reasons for that. I mean,
there is.
The globalization of the economy in general is a big part of that. Things like the TPP, which Mike Pence and Hillary Clinton up until this primary supported, are a part of that.
But let's also call it what it is, because fear of globalization in some ways is an aspect of it. I mean, some of it's legitimate, but some of it
drives down wages.
To quote Public Enemy, is fear of a black planet.
Sure,
because white people are a minority in the world, and that's just the way it is.
And we're gonna have to leave it there. That's the end of our show for this week. Be sure to find us on Twitter. You can follow us at Mountain State Up, and you can find us on YouTube. There's a link to the YouTube page on the Twitter page. I'm John Cantees. Dan Heyman joining me today. Thanks for coming in, Dan.
Yep.
And we'll be back next week on WTSQ.org live, and you can listen to us at 88.1 if you're in Charleston. We're also on WWSA 96.9 in St. Albans. So thanks for listening. We'll see you next week right here on WTSQ.